Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jeremy Leffler, and I work in the policy office at the National Science Foundation, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our final day of the Fall 2021 NSF Virtual Grants Conference. And I'm now pleased to present this session covering Research.gov and updates to NSF's proposal system modernization. This session will be presented by Stephanie Yee, who's an IT specialist in the NSF Division of Information Systems.
All right, hi, welcome. Welcome to the Research.gov update and demonstration from the National Science Foundation. My name is Stephanie Yee, and I'm the project manager for the production support for systems such like Fastlane, Research.gov, and Grants.gov. I'm part of the Office of Information Resource Management Directorate and part of the Division of Information Systems. My email address is listed here in case someone wants to contact me after this presentation. For our agenda today, I'm going to highlight again some of the reasons why we are migrating the proposal submission system from Fastlane to Research.gov. I'm going to go over the highlights of the advantages of using this and a little bit of insight into our migration strategy. I'll also be sharing Research.gov proposal tips and what is coming ahead for our systems. I'll be going over the enhancements and functionality that we've been implementing recently, and also a demonstration will be done with all the new features and an opportunity for everyone to ask questions at the end. I'll also be sharing some important resources available to your community for training and also for looking at some frequently asked questions about our systems, and also some contacts. Migrating proposal preparation submission from Fastlane to Research.gov. So I'm going to start talking about the important notice number 147. So this was released a little over a year ago on September 22nd, 2020. This was an announcement to the community basically saying that NSF is taking more of a proactive approach of trying to move our proposal submission module from Fastlane to Research.gov. We are targeting of removing all proposal submission functionality from Fastlane by December 31st, 2022. This date was not previously advertised before, but we are ready with this date now. So many funding opportunities are supported in Research.gov, and the solicitations themselves will specify whether or not it is available there or not. So a little bit over the why. One reason is Fastlane was introduced to the community in 1994. The technology was quite cutting edge back then, but as you know, it is quite a few years since then, and it's no longer able to keep up with the demands of today. It's very difficult to add enhancements. It has a lot of outdated user interface, and it's just not ready for what we need today. And it's really stopping us from putting in new enhancements that might cut down on compliance checking and reducing burden over time. So it really needs an upgrade. Since July 2020, Research.gov is able to support all research proposals that conform to the PAPG requirements for formatting and document content. And right now, anytime there's a new proposal type or submission type, we are focusing the development only in Research.gov. Migrating proposal and preparation submission from Fastlane to Research.gov. How are we doing this? Well, first, we're incrementally adding Fastlane features to Research.gov features over time. In 2018, when we released proposal preparation in Research.gov, it was very limited, and this was deliberate. We don't want to introduce a whole system overnight to our users. We have been slowly introducing features to our customers, and this transition will reduce the burden of people having to learn too many things at once. But also, most importantly, it gives an opportunity for everyone to provide feedback to us so we can adjust accordingly if something doesn't work. We're also engaging a lot with NSF staff. We are meeting with them very frequently on a regular basis to let them know what changes are coming up so they too can support their PIs when there are questions. And with this together, everyone is aware of what changes we're making and make sure feedback is incorporated more frequently. Also, we're engaging the foundation and engaging the directorates to try to increase our outreach to our community. We've been working with key solicitations on providing webinars if there is a large expected submission, and we are offering training and more outreach within our community and external communities when requested. We are also trying to bolster our training. So as you will see in the demos, we spent a lot of time making sure the inline help and the guides are smart so people can get help when they need to, but also try to bolster training by methods of creating new user guides. So in our Research.gov about pages, we're trying to add more quick guides for administrators so they can take a look at that and make sure that they can train themselves and their users. And also, we'll be continuing updating the NSF policy documents, including the PAT-G. So what are the advantages of using Research.gov for proposal preparation? So several conferences ago, some people asked, is there a way that I can quickly explain to my community why I should be using Research.gov? And so we developed this slide to help make some key bullet points for people to realize what is advantageous about using this system. The system has vastly improved the user experience by making sure the interface is intuitive and is up to today's modern standards. We are incorporating immediate feedback at each step. There are feedback constantly whenever people are updating sections on what is needed for that section or what is needs correction. Faster uploads. In Fastlane, each file upload could take up to a minute just due to the whole redistilling process. In Research.gov, we're not touching those PDFs, so uploads are much faster and feedback is much faster. In addition, we have vastly expanded our compliance checking, giving users more error messages and warnings about what is not compliant about their files. There are currently over 100 compliance checks in Research.gov versus only around 60 in Fastlane. Each error message are actionable and more useful. Also, this bullet is something that I stress at all conferences and all trainings, is that is a higher quality proposal submission. And what I mean by that is the PDF itself is not altered. So your image resolutions, those are crisp versus in Fastlane. And the reason is in Fastlane, we are touching that PDF, we're redistilling it. In Research.gov, we're not touching the PDF. So it looks better. And also a minimized return without review due to formatting issues. So I like to go over some Research.gov proposal preparation tips. I always like to reiterate these with people whenever I get a chance. So Research.gov is being added to solicitations whenever possible at reclearance, even if Fastlane is not removed. We're strongly suggesting proposal submissions through rGov. Just a reminder that program descriptions are also available in Research.gov. One thing to note is that proposal information cannot be transferred between one system to another. So you cannot start a proposal in Fastlane and then transfer that information to Research.gov. Once you start a proposal in one system, it will stay in that one system. Similarly, the PFUs, the proposal file updates, behave the same. If you prepare a proposal in Fastlane and it's submitted there, you have to do a proposal file update in Fastlane and vice versa. All proposals in a collaborative set also must be submitted in the same system. All individual organizations must start either all in Fastlane or are in Research.gov. And just a reminder, the proposals are evaluated the same. The proposals look the same within NSF, and it does not impact the merit review process in any way. Where we are and what's ahead. So this chart is very large and the font is very small, but I want you to take away that the left column, which is current capabilities, is getting larger and larger, and the upcoming capabilities and future capabilities are getting smaller. As I mentioned, we are very aggressively trying to push all the functionality over to Research.gov, and we're doing pretty well. And so I will be going over some of the features for the most recent releases, and you can read ahead on what's coming up, but nothing much is left. So we're doing pretty well. So now I'm going to spend a few moments talking about the most recent Research.gov proposal enhancements. So most recently, we had releases back in August, end of August, and also October 4th. The new submission types we're supporting are preliminary proposals only for Ideas Lab, renewals, accomplish-based renewals, and also letter of intent. For proposal types, we've introduced conferences, Ideas Lab, goalie, and planning. So some of the recent enhancements that you can expect is the proposal preparation dashboard. So as you are familiar with, there's 3 major sections to this page: prepare, new, working in things in progress, and things that were submitted. One major change is the blue button with the arrows now. So before it used to be one button, but now it is a drop down that will allow you to select what selection of a new item that you want to start with. So for example, prepare new, when you click on that dropdown, you will see all different types that you can choose. So this is a screenshot of what it looks like expanded. As you can see, they are ordered in a reasonable way of letter of intent, preliminary proposals, full proposals, renewals, and ABRs. So one highlight of a recent enhancement that we've introduced is the letter of intent. So we enabled this on October 4th. So PIs, SBOs, or AORs can initiate a letter of intent. And only letters of intent prepared in Research.gov can be associated with the Research.gov full proposal. So what that means is you cannot create a letter of intent in Fastlane and then submit a full proposal in Research.gov. If you prepare a letter of intent in Research.gov, that full proposal needs to be prepared in Research.gov. There's not a mix of the systems. Another enhancement we've put in is the use of a preliminary proposal. Just to strongly stress, this is only available for Ideas Lab right now. All other preliminary proposals are still must be prepared in Fastlane. Because of this, when you go into I'm going to start calling it prelim. When you go to the prelim proposals, we will only filter the funding opportunities that's applicable to that type. So for new renewals, the available proposal types for renewals are only limited to research, goalie, FOSSID, conference, and travel. And if you need to renew a rapid or eager or planning proposals, the PIs would have to select a research proposal type. Again, I will show you this in the demo, but the system will make sure that people are making the right choices. This is just really quickly, just to point out the wizard feature. So when you create a proposal, there are several steps. The same idea applies to all these other types. I mentioned the new proposal types. They will be added to the step 3 of the proposal wizard. And so up here, you can see the current capabilities are going to be at the top and enabled, and at the bottom, those are our future capabilities that's not yet there. The same concept applies to the in progress tiles. If you click on that down arrow, you will see other types that you can work on. Same with submitted and updates tile. The next few slides, I would like to start spending a little more time on the biographical sketch and current and pending support formats that are implemented new and effective as of October 4th. So updates to the NSF approved biographical sketch and current pending support formats. So there's 2 new formats now effective October 4th. You can find these formats, the fillable pieces, on the policy website for both BioSketch and current pending support. The forms for Science CV are available as well. Just a very strong note for any opportunities due on or after October 4th need to use these newer formats. They were released back in September, available for the community, but they were not, you were not able to upload those until the October 4th timeframe. So if you are by chance working on a solicitation that is due this week or next week, just double check that people were not uploading the older form because they were not able to do that until the 4th. So just make sure that that update has been made before your deadline. The biographical sketch format has been changed from 2 pages to 3, and there are additional sections to current and pending support. So for Science CV, the new formats are there, and on the visual display of the screen, it's not very obvious whether or not you're looking at the 22-1 or the 20-1. So one way to find out is to take that file from Science CV, look at the properties, and look at the title of that document. Looking at that document, you should be seeing something that says NSF BioSketch 22-1 or NSF CPS 22-1. If you are seeing evidence of a 20-1, you are using the older format. But one thing to note, if you have an existing document in the 20-1 format, Science CV will automatically convert that file to the 22-1 version after October 4th. So if you are in that boat, I encourage you to go to Science CV and check that version out. So one note about the NSF approved format, this is a quick screenshot of what it looks like for the NSF fillable PDFs. On the first page, on the upper left-hand corner, there's an effective date, and you can see very quickly whether or not it is effective October or a different date. The other date was May 2020. So that's a very quick visual way for you to take a look of what version you have. Also, the current version, the 22-1, is longer. It is 27 pages. The trimming functionality. So I mentioned the new CMP document is 27 pages. Do not fret, we have implemented a training functionality. So for the CMP document, fillable PDF, we are introducing a trimming functionality. This was introduced in Fastlane and grants.gov on August 30th and on Research.gov on October 4th. This means that we are going to take the CMP document, which is 27 pages, detect any blank pages, which means no data was entered, and we will trim those pages out. The trimming feature in Research.gov and Fastlane, that is triggered upon upload and also at grants.gov upon submission. The CMP documents submitted as part of an annual or final project report in Research.gov will also be trimmed. So please note that this functionality only applies to CMP documents. It doesn't apply to any other PDFs. So please don't try to upload any other documents there to get the trimming feature to work. Science CV documents are not trimmed because they are printed to fit the content that is there. Just one note that when you do upload a CMP document, which is a fillable form, and pages are trimmed, the page numbers are not maintained. So it's possible that some pages are skipped. And now we're going to go over the Research.gov demonstration. So some things I'm going to cover are the changes in the setup wizard. I'm going to be iterating some features on the main proposals page. I'm going to go over some of the common upload compliance checks and warnings. I'll go over the budget and also the highlights of the changes that we've most recently implemented. So we are now on the Research.gov desktop. So this is the screen you see if you are logging in and you have access to proposal submission. So over on the left-hand side under prepare and submit proposals, we have a renamed link. It's now letters of intent and proposals. So we're going to go ahead and click that. And I wanted to pause and bring your attention to the modal up here. So this is a box that pops out for people, and pay attention to this whenever we have releases. We If there are very specific messages we'd like to note about the release, we will put that here. It also has this handy dandy link, which will take you to the submissions and capabilities, where you can, again, take a look at what is currently available and which is not. So I'm going to go back to the screen. I'm going to click on prepare, continue on. So these are the 3 boxes I mentioned earlier, where we are now introducing this new dropdown where people can select the type of new item that they want to create. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and start with letter of intent. So for letters of intent, as you can see, this takes over, it's very similar to the other wizard type of pages you'll see throughout Research.gov. So for step 1, this is where you select your funding opportunity. So the system is going to know by the time you get to this page which opportunities to show you. It's only going to show you opportunities that have applicable letters of intent. Anyone can create one, meaning the PIs, AORs, or SPOs. And for this, I'm going to select this one, the size opportunity. And so where to apply, this looks a little bit different than full proposals, but here you can select 1, 2, or 3 places to apply to. And then the last step is just the title. So we're going to put a title in. One note is for titles, you cannot add a special characters such as apostrophes. And if you do, it will warn you right on the screen that that character is not allowed. So just pay attention to that. I'll go ahead and create the letter of intent. So now we're on the main dashboard, the main page for the letter of intent. You have up here your temporary proposal, your temporary ID. So this is useful in case you run into issues with IT help. They would need to know this number. And this is your header right here. So notice that a lot of this came from the choices you made in that wizard steps 1 through 3. If you make a mistake or you need to change things like where to apply, unfortunately, that is not something that you can change at this point. You would have to create a new letter of intent. You can, however, change the title as you please on this first page. Also, if there is a deadline, it will automatically populate here, but if there's multiple deadlines, you have to choose one. So now we're at the main page. I wanted to highlight the required and optional sections. So for all letters of intent, the project synopsis is a required section, but depending on how this solicitation is written, depending on what settings NSF program decided to check, you may or may not have these other sections. So for example, this particular opportunity has an other comments and organization and project information. And those are specific to the solicitations. So not everyone's going to have the same sections, but you'll always have a project synopsis. And so here, like other upload screens throughout Research.gov, you're going to have instructions at the top, letting you know, some more technical details about things like how many files you can upload, how large those files can be. And also in the upper right-hand corner on every upload screen, take note of a helpful link here that will take you to the appropriate section in the PAPG. Okay. And I'm going to just open if you look over here to the left, I just want to point your attention to this section called Action. So this section appears all over the place in proposal submission. So just know that, it's quite different how Fastlane is laid out. Fastlane has more of a button, in the center at the bottom type of format. All your actions are going to be here. If you want to share your item with the AOR, if you want to initiate submission, if you want to manage people, manage organizations, print a letter, deleting it, you're going to do it all through this area here. So I'm going to click on managing organizations. So one thing that is a little different for letters of intent, you can enter, the organizations don't have to have a DUNS number. So you can add that here because it's just a letter of intent. All right. All right. And also please note that each letter of intent has different requirements for senior personnel. So this page will know that from the solicitation and will allow you to add or not add people as applicable to the solicitation. All right. So that's all I plan to show for letters of intent. So I'm going to go back to my desktop and show you really quickly the prelim proposal feature. So the next one I would like to briefly show is preliminary proposals. And as I mentioned, right now, it's only available for Ideas Lab. And so when you get to the step 1 page here, we will know what you're trying to access, and we will only display the funding opportunity that applies. I'm going to briefly show you this just because, you know, when we do implement prelim proposals for everybody else, it's going to have the same look and feel, even though it's not going to be identical. I'll go ahead and click here. It's the same idea where you put a title, no special characters. In here, because it's a prelim, there's going to be an abbreviated amount of sections that's going to be required. All right. So the next thing I'm going to show you are renewals. So here there's 2 types, renewal proposals and accomplished-based renewals. I'm going to show you accomplished-based renewals because that is, you know, slightly different than just your basic renewal proposals. So I like to highlight the differences there. So when you select, I'm going to start calling this ABRs for short. So when you start an ABR, you can select, you know, your regular funding opportunities. They don't have to match the funding opportunity from your previous award. And you're going to see a step 2 on where to apply. So this is very similar to regular proposals where you have to select where you want your proposal to go. And I wanted to highlight just for a moment the save selection here. So people, if your opportunity allows it, you can select multiple places for your proposal to go. And once you selected it here, you have these arrows to rearrange those. So that's a very good feature. Do note that some opportunities will not allow you to select more than one. Sometimes it would only allow you to select one. So just be aware of that. So now we're on step 3 of the wizard for proposal type. And as you can see, there's a list, but some things are grayed out. So if you hover your mouse over some of these and say, I'm trying to do a renewal, but I want to do it for a rapid. If you hover over, there's going to be a little info box that's going to pop up to let you know not available based on previous selections. Or let's see, it's down here, not yet available. So take note of, you know, if you notice that you're getting this red circle with the X around it, you can hover over the choices just to see why you're experiencing that. And a note up here, just to remind people, if you're renewing a rapid, eager, or planning proposal, the proposal type must be research. So step 4 is something quite unique to renewals, and this is where the PI needs to select their previous award. So this is all test data. So in here, you can go ahead and select your award, but I wanted to highlight this here. Maybe you are applying from an organization that was not on the previous award, and you want to renew, be part of this renewal. If that is the case, it will pop up a different screen at the bottom for you. What type of proposal are you submitting? If you notice, you can only participate as a collaborative, and you can only participate as a non-lead. So this will automatically take the user to the screens that they need to and the inputs that they need to put in. I'm going to go ahead and go back and say, no, I'm going to use my award. And as you can see, it's a little more straightforward where we are going to pre-pen your title with ABR so we know it's an accomplished-based renewal. You can prepare your proposal. So this is your main screen. It's very, very similar to a full proposal where you have your sections here and then your due dates and your actions on the left-hand side. Let's see. Please take a note of the required sections. We know what type of item you're trying to create, and so the required sections will be updated accordingly. So for example, you can see publications is a new section here, and human resources development, for example. I want to briefly show you, let's see. Actually, I will show you on the next highlight. All right, so that's all I want to show you on accomplished-based renewals before I go on to other proposal types. So how I'm gonna do the demo going forward is as I go through some proposal types, I might pick a section or two to highlight, which will apply to other sections, just so I have a chance to touch upon those. So the next thing I'm gonna go over are the new proposal types. I'm gonna go ahead and create a new full proposal. Yeah, so you can see this is an example where I selected a division and there's no other program you can select. So I'm going to show you right here. So conference proposal is here. And if you notice, once I clicked on that, another secondary question comes up. Will there be support from other sources for the conference? So unlike other things in the wizard, if you want to change your mind, selecting yes, or maybe you're not sure, this is something you can change later on. So don't feel like you have to be committed to the answer yes. This is something you can change later on. I'll go ahead and start this up. So again, these sections are specific to a conference. It's very similar to how travel proposals are, which were implemented in March. And I'm going to highlight now for the budget. So right here is the budget. It's quite more sophisticated than Fastlane. A quick tip for people. So my screen is not very wide. As you can see, it looks a little squished. There's a link on the left-hand side called Hide Menu. I recommend using that when using the budget. So here you have some handy tips here. You can expand all rows or collapse them. That will help you take a better look at it. And you can add years here. You can add blank years or copy from existing years. And you can also delete years. One feature I also wanted to highlight is the senior personnel and how to move them. I think it's not as intuitive. Sometimes you are adding people which may not take a salary and you don't want them on the budget. The system will stop you from saving a budget with people on it with $0. So the easiest way to handle that is to take them off the budget. So for example, I can take off this PI from the budget if I choose. All right, I'll put them back. So one thing to note for conference proposals, it can't exceed 50,000. So I'm just gonna, and if you can't remember that, that's okay, because the system will do that for you and instruct you what you need to do. So in this case, if you have a budget exceeding 50,000, you must upload a collaborators and other affiliation document for each individual in the senior personnel. If it's less than 51,000, that requirement does not apply. And the system will know that. All right. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and move on to the next thing, which is the goalie proposal. Oh, another navigation trick. Just make sure I love to use the top bar here. So I'm gonna go ahead and create another full proposal. I'm gonna select goalie. So goalie proposals have additional sections required here. So as you can see, you must upload industrial PI confirmation letters. That is a new section here. And just a note for budgets for these types of proposals, you can't add industrial co-PIs to their budget. I'm going to touch upon the senior personnel documents for a little bit. So as you know, you may have to add a lot of senior personnel, and it's hard to know who has what documents. This is the place you need to go, which is the senior personnel documents. We have handy links up here to expand or collapse all, and this is useful for people to just quickly scan whether or not they are compliant for each of their documents. I'm just going to really quickly go over the current pending support. So as I mentioned, we are trimming this document. So I just want people to know, don't be alarmed if we are trimming your document. It is on purpose. So right now I'm uploading a post October 4th current pending support is 27 pages long and has been uploaded successfully. What's happening behind the scenes is that our system, look at this, it's only 3 pages long. So it's going to detect data, and if there's no data, we're only going to keep the pages that have data. Okay. All right. And I wanted to briefly talk about project description. This is a section that is required in most of the items you'll be creating in Research.gov. I mentioned a lot about errors and warnings that you might get. Project description is one of those sections that does a lot of checking on those. We have links up here to remind people about the PAT-G requirements on these. For example, your project description must include a broader impact. Some commonly seen issues that I see is that broader impacts, must be on its own line. It can't say broader impacts and then, a slew of sentences after that. It has to be its own line for our programs to detect that section is there. We also check things like if the file is exceeding 15 pages or not. And of course, so we're no longer checking fonts due to some of the feedback we received when that was implemented. We realized we need to just take a second look at that. So for now, we have removed font checks, but still in place are things like line spacing and margins. And so for margins, a little, not as much traffic there, but I would like to share with people something about margins. Do be mindful of the alignments that you use in your document. We are seeing more problems with people who justify both sides of their margins. So if you're using a left alignment, you will encounter fewer problems than someone that has alignments on both sides. And that's because the right margin alignment, sometimes special characters can bleed into that margin. So just be aware of that and experiment with, maybe increasing the right margin just a little bit, like 0.01 or 2 to accommodate that. But the other alternative is to, try the left alignment, and that sometimes will resolve many of the issues for margins. Okay. All right. So the next thing I want to show you is the planning proposal. Again, this is a new proposal type. There it is, it's at the top. Very simple wizard, it's very similar to the other types. And it has a very similar home page. So one thing to note, I want to cover for you. So the cover sheet. So the cover sheet is unique for a planning proposal. It can't have a duration longer than 24 months. We will validate that for you in case you go over. Some other notable changes are, for example, project description. It is only 8 pages long. I would like to update people. There was a new change in August. I was just reminded of this, of URLs. So notice here in the instructions, URLs must not be used in project descriptions. Before August, I believe this was a warning, but now there's going to be a hard stop. So please be mindful of URLs that you are using. It's not just whether or not it's an actual link in your document. If it looks like a URL, that will trigger the error messages. So that means be mindful of things that have a .com, a .gov, a .edu, the www. Just look out for those. And we are scanning for that. All right. And the last thing I wanted to cover for planning proposals is that their budgets is slightly different. Not that it's different, but there's different validations. So note for planning proposals, as I mentioned in the cover sheet, you can only have a max of 2 years. We will not stop you from adding as many years as you want, but as I mentioned, I added 3 here because we don't know what you're editing, and that might be easier for you. But if you try to save it, it will let you know the business rules for this type of proposal. So it's going to make you delete one of these years before you can proceed. In addition, these planning proposals can't exceed $200,000, so we will be checking for that dollar amount as well. And you cannot exceed more than $100,000 per year. Those are the rules for the planning proposals. And that concludes my demo of all the features. I would like to talk about our demo site and our training resources, which are very useful. And first, I'm going to talk about the demonstration site. So as we were rolling this out, a lot of the community was telling us, we want to get in there and we want to check it out. It's not easy for people who don't have PI roles to be able to look in the system. And so in October of 2020, we've developed a demonstration site, which is available to anyone with an NSF ID. So if you are in the administrative office, or if you have some students that don't really have a PI role yet, but maybe they're a supportive role, anyone with an NSF ID can come in here and pretend they are a PI for the day on our demonstration site. So all you need is a working NSF ID. And when you log into the system, there's going to be a link called demo under the proposal preparation box on the left-hand side. When you click on the demo link, everyone's going to be acting as a PI. There's only a PI role available for the demo site, and you are only able to access the prepare new proposal or the in progress proposal section. So this will allow you to create, upload documents and kind of experiment with the validations that are in place for each of the proposal types or the submission types. So this is very useful. It's also useful for people here at NSF to be able to see what you are seeing on the screen. Unfortunately, as this big X says, because of the limitations of the demonstration site, you are not able to submit a proposal. You can only do the preparation piece for this. And always be mindful of the banner up here that reminds you you're on a demonstration site. And so you are not mixing up the two environments. I also want to point out our training resources on our About pages. So on the upper right-hand corner of Research.gov, there are links to our About pages, and there are links here. And so this is something that we are continuously adding and improving. Anytime, if we're seeing an issue at IT Hub Central, that is something that we may consider adding an FAQ on. So always check back frequently for updates on that. But also over here, we have these broken up by sections, we have FAQs, and we also have links to videos. So if you're more of a visual person, instead of looking at slides or looking at PDFs, you can take a look at this video, and it's a great starting point of getting people used to how the system flows and how it works. Also, over time, we're adding more quick guides or how-to guides. They are very short PDF guides with lots of graphics that's more specific on a specific function. So for example, we have a quick guide on just how to initiate a proposal. So we are adding to that on a regular basis. Also, I mentioned this earlier, but take advantage of the inline help. We put links within each page in a smart manner. We make sure the links take you to a relevant section. We're not taking you to something that's 1,000 pages long. We are taking you to where you need to be. And so on each page, it's kind of small, but at the bottom left-hand corner, there's something called related links. You can access videos that's applicable to that section. And also, hover your mouse over the I buttons. Those will tell you what you need to know about that section. And this is just some resources that you can look through. I highly encourage you to subscribe to our listserv. This is one of our primary ways to get the news out about any changes that's happening at NSF, not just for Research.gov. So please sign up for that. And also there's a link here for some of our automatic compliance checking in case you wanted to see how what is being checked. And this is just a link about the more information about the proposal submission. As part of proposal submission, there's account management, administering roles. This link is a great PDF for account administrators. And also this is the ERA forum. This is another way to get your input here at NSF. And if you're interested, this is the listserv here. Again, these are some contact information. As you know, we have a marvelous help desk and they have pretty lengthy hours. So they're open Monday through Friday, unless it's a holiday, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Also, we're checking emails very quickly, but if you have an urgent IT Up Central, I recommend calling over emailing because sometimes emails take a little bit of time to actually create the ticket and get a technician assigned to you. But that recently has been getting faster and faster. But if you have a deadline, it's urgent, make a phone call. And again, they cannot answer policy questions. They can't read the minds of program officers. So if you have a program question, contact your cognizant program officer. Policy questions, go to policy. And thank you for your participation.
Okay. Thank you, Stephanie. I'd like to invite Stephanie to come back. And Stephanie and I and her team have been answering a lot of questions as they've been coming in. We do have a little bit of time. So I would say that if you still do have questions, please send them and we'll try and get to them. I don't know that we'll be able to get to all of them, but we're gonna begin. And some of these we've identified as wanting to ask live because they're responses that are perhaps easier to discuss rather than type out. So the first question that I'm going to ask is about, somebody has said, it would be very helpful if the system would allow for view access automatically for Office of Sponsored Project offices. Can you talk about that a little bit, Stephanie?
Yes. So although that might be convenient for you, I could see some PIs not wanting to do that quite yet. So the idea is the PI controls the information, how that's released to the organization. So we like to give that control for the PI to indicate explicitly when to share, when to allow access. I think it's interesting your comment that PIs believe that once they allow access, they don't have access any longer, like it's out of their control. And that's the first time I've heard of that. That's an interesting take on that. I haven't thought about that actually. So I did write down a note just to say, is there, for my team to look at to see, is there anything we can do visually on the screen that, assures them, no, you're not releasing all control over this proposal. Once you do that, it's just so people can start working on it, start viewing it, start putting, giving input. So that's interesting. I've never heard that before, but we still like to give the PI a little control of who can see it.
Okay, and then moving to the next one, which is, I guess, tangentially related. Is there a way for research administrators to initiate the proposal versus the PI?
So yes, the way to do that is grant yourself the PI role. So that's the easiest way to do that. I think it is relatively commonly used amongst administrators that they have the PI role. Once you have that, you can create proposals all day long. In Fastlane, I do recognize it's a little easier for an administrator in Fastlane because there's a button where you can swap, right? You can swap the PI with the co-PI. And I think that is commonly used. We have that comment at every conference that we would like a similar feature in Research.gov. So that is on the docket for something for us to do. So if you are an administrator, make sure you have the PI role so you can start on that proposal. And before we cut this off, we'll make sure that switching that would be a lot easier. But yes, right now, you can still do it. You can still grant yourself PIs, create proposals, Research.gov, but swapping the two roles out is a little more cumbersome, but it's doable.
Okay. The next question is, Stephanie, you talked about Research.gov having improved PDF fidelity. So this could be a huge selling point for many administrators to take to their PIs. So could you go into a little bit more detail about how this is and how it will be better?
Yes. So in Fastlane, very, very old technology, 1994, we're taking documents and stitching them together. That whole process is very intensive. It touches the documents. You're losing a little bit of resolution. You're losing maybe a bit of searchability. Sometimes the text could get garbled, not visually on the screen, but when you're trying to extract data, it can happen in Fastlane. All of these things are pain points, and that is something we definitely addressed in Research.gov. So we're not touching that file. We're keeping everything exactly the way the PI intended it. And I see it most effectively happening with resolutions of images and things like that. The finer details are present. So visually, it looks better in Research.gov. And Jeremy, if I could, there was one other additional question from the previous comment I wanted to address.
Please, go ahead.
So there was a comment about, can more than one person work on a proposal at the same time? And the answer is yes, but I want to let everyone on this call, there's caveats to doing that. Just be careful when you do that. I find it in general, it's a little hairy when you have more than one person working on a section. I've seen really bad things happen when people are working on a budget. One person is modifying a budget. Somebody else took a senior personnel off the budget. I mean, so just be aware that when you do things like that, it's very, unexpected. Just be careful, be in close communication with your people, make sure no one is removing senior personnel versus one person is modifying it in the budget. Some crazy things could happen and you have to call IT help. So just be careful. The follow-up question to that is there a way to lock out someone? That's not a feature we're looking at. So far, other than that budget situation, hasn't caused a problem quite yet with people. But that is something that I could take back to my team to consider. But right now, we're not locking anyone out. You can have many people working on the same section. I'm just saying, just be careful because you can't, people can save it at any time.
Okay, great. So the next question is about LaTeX settings and 1-inch margins not always working. And can you talk a little bit more about what NSF is doing and what some of the issues are?
Yeah, so LaTeX is something that people are using that's causing some problems with the margins and sometimes line spacing and other things. It is something we are aware of. We're hearing a lot of feedback from the communities that use that or more prevalent users of that technology. Just know that we are taking a second look. There are some advocates within NSF that are LaTeX users that reached out to us to say this problem does exist. I will say of the discussions that I've had, when you set margins on LaTeX, I'm getting feedback from the community. These are, feedback that I get from IT Hub Central that LaTeX is not quite respecting that 1-inch. So I take that away as even if you set it for 1-inch, something is happening with that conversion. It's not quite, not quite making it there. So we are taking a second look at it from multiple standpoints. We are taking a second look about how we calculate margins. We are taking a second look of maybe what can we do to provide more support for the LaTeX communities. Some of the ideas swirling around is perhaps we could provide some samples of working, LaTeX, files and packages that work. So those are things that we are exploring to support the LaTeX community. And that is something we are actively talking about.
Since we're talking about warnings and errors, perhaps it'd be a good idea to talk about the difference between the two in Research.gov when you do see a warning versus when you see an error.
So for me, it comes down to, can you submit your proposal that way? So when you have an error, it's a hard stop. You can't move on. You can't upload that file. You can't save your document. You can't proceed further. That is a very serious blockage for you. And that is something you have to, if you're against the deadline, you have to call IT help, try to get that fixed right away. If you're experiencing a warning, that is something that is, we're just letting you know there's an issue, but that's not something that's going to prevent you from moving forward. So line spacing is an example of a warning. I mentioned in some of the Q&A, because it's a warning, I don't have much information on that. Some people are just taking it as a warning, double checking their file, but we're letting you proceed forward. We're probably getting fewer tickets on that. So just, if you're up against deadline, you're worried about that warning, I'd say just, if you double check your file, submit it. It's not stopping you. So don't get hung up on that. I've seen times when people get very anxious about the warnings and they call IT help. That doesn't have to happen.
The other thing I'd mention about that is that those errors and warnings are based on the requirements that are set forth in the PAP guide, and oftentimes solicitations will deviate from those from those requirements. And so those warnings will often direct you to look at your solicitation to ensure that you are indeed following the proper requirements. The following up on warnings and line space and warnings and errors, the next question is about the collaborators and other affiliations document in Research.gov and frequent warnings about line spacing. And the person is asking if that's common or if there's a warning that we should be concerned about.
So that's an interesting comment. I had to think about it. For the COA document, I don't think there's a line spacing warning. If there is, I would love to see your sample. The most common errors on the COA document are actually the date field. So if you guys can recall it, the last field and most of the tables have a date field of saying like, when was your last affiliation? And the biggest problem people do is write current, or they write words in there. I just want to stress, you have to conform to the requirements there. Make sure it's in a date format. Once you write the text current there, it'll make that whole section blank. So just be careful about that. Also be careful about cutting and pasting. So what a lot of people are doing is they're cutting and pasting things from Google Sheets into an Excel document, or they're trying to collect data from more than one person, and you're pasting in a format, or you're pasting in something, a formula, something unexpected for that document. So I just want to be sure, make sure you have the latest COA document. They change. Make sure if you're cutting and pasting, do it with care. If you have a large amount of people on your COA document, please, for your sanity's sake, check the COA document at regular intervals. Don't wait until that file is 500 people long and try to upload it. You'll go crazy trying to find which person has the issue. Another common issue I'm seeing with COAs are special characters. So we're talking about foreign characters or accent marks, locations, people's names. Those sometimes can cause an issue. So those are all the issues I know about COAs. But stick to the formats, make sure it's the most up to date, and I would prefer to type it in instead of cutting and pasting, because that could result in changing the margins or the edge of the document sometimes.
Okay. Next question is asking about, is there a way to save workspaces for active proposals that you're working on as a research administrator so that you're not having to search every time?
I'm interpreting that as, is there a way to have a space with like fewer proposals, so you know to work on those versus
Or if there's
other ones?
a dashboard of your types of your proposals.
So currently there's not anything in the pipeline to do something like that. I think that's an interesting idea. There is something, outside of proposal modernization, we always are trying to be reflective about what is usable for people. And one thing that's on the to-do list, but not an urgent to-do list, is how can we make the dashboard of Research.gov more useful? Right now, it's kind of just a whole bunch of information. We put links in, logical buckets. Proposal preparation is in one bucket. Notifications and requests is another bucket. There has been talk about, it would be really nice to make that dashboard smarter, a lot more usable for people, for maybe a workspace like you were mentioning, that helps administrators with a whole slew of stuff to look at, be able to narrow that down. So it's in the back of our minds, but it's not a high priority, but it is something that we are looking at, but not right
now. Let's see. Next question is there a way to swap out a co-PI with senior personnel without removing and re-adding them? Or will there be a way?
Well, that's interesting. Since we haven't developed, as I mentioned earlier, there is something on the roadmap to be able to swap co-PIs and PIs, but I haven't thought about senior personnel. Can you do a switch like that? What I'll do is just make sure my developers know that, and we can put it under discussion to see if that is something useful. But that's the first time I've heard that, but I can see that being useful. Thank you, Taylor.
Okay, the next question is about roles. And somebody who's in an administrative support role, is there a way for them to be able to see what is in the proposal and provide quick help without the ability to change it? So I guess it's a view role.
I see. So no, currently there's not a way to have a view-only role for a proposal. So when you add people to have access to your proposal, so OAU is one example where you might add a graduate student or someone to work on it. And remember, you can add OAUs to people outside your organization. So do that very carefully. There's not a view-only role. I don't know if there's a big demand for it. So anytime an enhancement like that comes along, I would say I just encourage you to submit that feedback on the orange feedback button at the bottom of Research.gov. There's a feedback button. If there's a feature you think we're missing, I would say put it there. But right now, there's nothing upcoming to add a view-only feature.
Okay, we got two questions on the collaborators and other affiliations template. And it's, is there a way to tell which version the COA template is? Now, I just sent a link to the most current version to the first person who asked that question, but is there a way through the properties of the document or to be able to know that?
So yes, there is. If you download the document, I'm downloading it right now. If you download the document in Microsoft Word, I don't know what buttons you click, but it's basically the info button. The quick answer is yes. If you open the file, there's an info, and in it, there is a version number and a size. I would say, I can see if we make 2 changes in 1 year, I can see where someone may not know it's the latest version. At a minimum, you'll see which PAPG it's related to. However, for example, this year for 22-1, we did not change the COA document. So if you download it today and you looked at the info, it will not say 22-1. It'll still say 20-1. That's a good question. I think
you may want to look at that.
Yeah. Is there a better way to show people? Because you're right. There's not a way right now for you to know, hey, do I have the latest version other than downloading it? The version on the policies website is always up to date. That I would say is your gold standard of which template is correct. You can take that and then open your version and just look at the info, see that the sizes are the same, see if the dates are the same. I would say that's the best manual way to check. But thank you for that. That I'm aware that's not, it's not an obvious, how do I know which version it is? Maybe it's something we can put in the title and something we can put on the policy page so people can know right away.
Right, those are easy fixes that we can do for that. We have a lot of sleuths here in the audience giving us very helpful information here. The question we have here is, a postdoc allowed to serve as a co-PI in the system? The system will allow you to serve as a co-PI as long as your institution, you need to follow your institution's rules for serving as a PI or co-PI on a project. You also need to check a given solicitation to see if there are different eligibility requirements that affect postdocs on a project. I am not seeing any other questions that we can answer at the moment. Lots of information from folks on the COA. Since we are coming to the close of the session anyway, I want to thank Stephanie and her team today for joining us and for answering all those questions. We do have 2 final sessions this afternoon covering programs in the NSF directorates for geosciences and engineering. So I hope you'll be able to attend one of those. I thank you all for your participation, and be well, everyone. Thank you.